Hi, this is a new Nigeria with Wale Oluwade. This is your current affairs program where we critically examine the strategic issues bedeviling Nigeria's developmental aspirations and boldly offer practical suggestions on building the Nigeria of our collective desires. Today's episode promises to be engaging and exciting, so get ready as we begin in earnest. And now, let's get on with it. Our topic today is practical steps to a new Nigeria. In 24 years of unbroken civilian rule, the evidence will seem to suggest that this democratic experiment has not delivered or performed even minimally as it ought to. The critical metrics of determining a nation's democratic health and viability are all in the negatives. Importantly, several misplaced policies of previous governments at various levels have made the living conditions for the generality of Nigerians extremely burdensome. What then do we need to correct as we go forward? Who will take on this daunting assignment? These are some of the issues we're examining today. We'll take this short break, and when we return, we'll get right into our conversation. Please stay with us. Welcome back. My guest is already here, Professor Yusuf Alizuaka. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Good to see you again, Prof.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Professor Yusuf Alizuaka is a lecturer at the Department of Political Science and International Relations at the University of Abuja. Once again, Prof, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you again. Let's sink our teeth into our conversation today. Since the inauguration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on May 29th, what has been your impression, both in terms of pace, style, and substance of his governance so far? What has been your impression?
Well, for me, I think what I have seen and I can comment on is the fact that, it appears that he was prepared, for the job, and that is why, he, right from the inauguration, he set the ball rolling, particularly with the
pronouncement
on fuel subsidy removal.
They said he hit the ground running.
Yes, and that actually shows that, he actually knew where the problem, bedeviling this country actually lies, particularly the scandal that you find in that, petroleum
Sector.
subsidy, in the sector generally. And so there, even though, a lot of people have expected that, since the subsidy is supposed to end by end of June, that he will use the month of June to at least prepare the grounds, for all sorts of cushioning effects of the removal. But that was not done, and I think that's one of the problems that I think it's a big challenge.
There's a unified foreign exchange now,
Yes.
Unlike before. So he's made certain appointments,
Yes.
So he's been in office now a little over 3 weeks,
Yes.
because next week, 29th June, will make it exactly a month. How do you rate him? How do you assess these 3 weeks and the critical decisions, both on appointments and all of that? How do you rate him in style, in substance, and all of that?
I think he appears to me to be someone who is very conscious of the diversity, particularly when it comes to the appointments that he has made. Of the service chiefs and, of course, the National Security Advisor. I think he's very conscious of the diversity, of Nigeria, because virtually all groups,
Zones or tribes or ethnicities.
Virtually there's no group that is not represented, because the minorities are represented, the major ethnic groups are represented. And so you will not find anybody that will say they are being marginalized.
Yes.
When it comes to that, compared to what we had in the past, where all the security agencies
were skewed
towards one, and that was, and the problem was not actually solved, because it rather increased. So it is hoped that, they will now go into the nitty-gritty of the problems, that is bedeviling the country. You cannot have 133 million people that are, said to be
living in multidimensional
poverty, and you expect that there will be peace. There will be no peace.
Absolutely.
And the criminality will increase, and all those things will be...
Yeah, political science is a professor at that of many years, this government came into office with perhaps the least approval of the public. Yeah. In fact, the legitimacy of the government was, questioned not just by candidates, co-contestants in the last elections, but by the generality of Nigerians. And that would inform the reason why, when he was announced as the winner of the presidential elections, you did not see jubilations, Everywhere was, eerily, silence. There was silence of, some have said silence of the graveyard, as it were, Now, I may be wrong, but it seems to me like working on the minds of Nigerians by some of the initial steps. How do you feel Nigerians are beginning to maybe open up their minds to say, okay, maybe this guy, because you actually even said something like that when you opened your remarks, that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu seems to be someone who has been well prepared for this job. What do you think?
Yeah, you see, the feelings you express is quite, something that has been analyzed. Even the Nigerian Political Science Association had held several,
discussions
on the elections.
Wow.
And in fact, a paper on the presidential elections was presented who actually said, look, the president was voted for by about 35% of the voters.
Of the voters, yes.
And that about 65% didn't vote for him.
Absolutely.
And so it made him what he referred to as a minority president.
Absolutely.
And so the issue of legitimacy is there. And so sometimes when you have this challenge, then you now begin to think of how you can work, on the, because he's the president and he cannot be in the office, waiting for tribunal result. He has to do the job that he has been elected to do.
Absolutely.
Whether wrongly or rightly.
Absolutely.
And so therefore the issue of, trying to do some of this, but, if you look at the petrol fuel subsidy removal, then you will say that, no, look, I don't think he's all that bothered. Because if it was somebody who was conscious, or the fact that, you are not the popular candidate, most popular candidate, but you are being, declared the winner, he wouldn't take that step,
decision,
so early.
Let me act like, let me play the other side. I don't want to use the phrase devil's advocate. Let me play the other side. Prof, did President Bola Ahmed Tinubu have any choice in removal of fuel subsidy? I have discussed, not just on this platform, I've been on several different television platforms, debating on the illegality, the criminality, the sheer, unpatriotic activities of a few Nigerians in this whole thing called fuel subsidy. It was a criminal enterprise that has gone on for too long. Prof, without delving so much on that, the point is that Nigeria was borrowing money to pay subsidies. Used to, we're paying subsidies, 150 billion, 350 billion, the highest under President Jonathan. Suddenly under President Buhari, 2019, 2020, 2021, fuel subsidy spiked to 1.5 trillion, then suddenly 4 trillion. This year, half year, January to June, fuel subsidy budget was over 4 trillion naira. If it goes on to December, that will be almost 9 trillion. We were printing money to pay fuel subsidy, whereas we left the issues that affect the lives of Nigerians, we left them unattended to. So, with due respect to you and other eggheads, and to us Nigerians who are suffering, who are bearing the brunt, Prof, I don't think President Bola Ahmed Tinubu had any choice, because we're spending 96% of our revenues, which are not even there, to service debt. But the area where I would agree with other analysts like myself is that maybe one of my friends said, he used a professor like you said, it's a sudden death approach. In management, in strategy, we'll call it, a big bang approach. That it will have been done in phases. Maybe you say, okay, a time frame of 6 months, and then you withdraw it, maybe every month or every 2 months or something. Maybe that, but I want to humbly submit, Prof, that no precedent. In fact, that President Buhari sustained that whole criminality throughout his tenure, when he himself had said there was nothing like that. Says so much about the former report. We're not going there. Let me bring you to this issue, Prof. Last week, about this time, or maybe Tuesday or so, we saw the National Assembly elections. I'm sure you followed it. What was your takeaway from the whole exercise?
Well, you see, for me, I think the elections were not all that free and fair.
Okay. Why do you say so?
I say so because you know, the legislature, you know, once you are elected, and you are either a senator or a member of House of Reps, the issue of party is not, you know,
Becomes secondary.
it's secondary because now you are supposed to go in there and get your officials, not based on anybody teleguiding you from outside. And that's what we saw. People you know, these are candidates. You go and vote for them. I mean, matured adults will not know who they can elect.
Were you not surprised, Prof? Because I was stunned that, especially in the House of Reps, where all the opposition parties, leading by the PDP, Labour, especially Labour, because of their vociferous agitation for a new Nigeria, obedience movement and all of that, you know, and they had 35 members in the House of Reps. And then the SDP, the NNPP, you know, and the YP and all of that. If you had all of their members, they outnumber the APC, the governing party. And we got the shocker, where not only that APC candidates won, he won by a ridiculous landslide, 353. Then the other two candidates got 3-3. So, Prof, what does this say to you about political development or maturity of our candidates for various offices?
You know, the problem they had in the House of Reps is they changed their procedures.
Okay.
It was supposed to be through secret, you know, just like we had in the
Senate.
In the Senate, because you cannot be elected, you know, because the election itself was based on secret ballot.
Yes.
Now you are in the House and they say now you are going to vote by
voice vote.
You know, voice vote. You have to stand up and say, I
voted for this.
I'm voting for this candidate. Now, knowing Nigeria the way it is structured and the way things happen, you know, some of them are afraid that they may be victimized at the end of the day if they should vote anything outside what.
But Prof, that goes back to my question. What does this say to you about the character of our elected officials? The legislature is a different arm of government.
Yes.
Not just different, independent arm. In fact, you and I on this program several times have agreed jointly that the legislature is actually what makes democracy. If you remove democracy, if you remove legislature from any government, it's not democracy anymore.
Certainly.
So if these guys cannot, and they belong to different parties, so who are they afraid of? That's the point, Prof. Who are they afraid of?
They are afraid of the executive.
That's what would happen.
They are the ones that know what will happen to them. Maybe they are, and don't forget that a lot of them have their interests. They want to be chairmen and so on of committees, and they will have, you know, gone into all sorts of deals. You know, to say, okay, fine, make me this committee chairman, and I will make sure that, you know, I get more members to vote for you.
And this brings me to this point. So, is this not a repeat of the 9th Assembly? Is this not symptomatic of state capture, where the executive can actually dictate what happens to the legislative arm of government?
It is really unfortunate. You know, a lot of the members are new.
Almost 70-something% of them are new.
And then, of course, you find that because they are also not used to the procedure of, you know, how things can be done or how things can actually be changed. You know, they now went into this whole ambush. And then, of course, not that the speaker is not
competent.
He's competent, qualified, and all that.
Of course, that's not what we're
talking about. If they had
about.
allowed, you know, a process that is
credible,
without any form of
devoid of any underhand
from outside. You know, the thing is for anybody from outside to tell you, this is the person
being teleguided.
Being teleguided. That's the problem I think they had in the House of Representatives. In the case of the Senate, at least you saw.
It was a keenly contested
and even those ones that are still contested in the House. You know, because it's democracy. And you cannot be muzzled into submission that you cannot express yourself. Your aspiration. And so I think those ones that also contested in the House should be commended because of their courage. Because it was, even though they didn't get much votes, but at least they were able to show that, you know, we should not just allow ourselves to be stampeded by anybody, because if we should allow that, then we'll become a rubber stamp. And then, of course, you know the way they do, the budget is supposed to be handled largely by the House of Reps.
Absolutely.
You know, and it simply means that, you know, we are not going to really get out of our, you know, all these crises we're having. Because right from the budget, that's where you see all this. How did you come about the trillions are talking about
in the fuel subsidy.
In the fuel subsidy.
When it was passed,
it's a
approved by
it's
the
a settlement because certainly they were, they debated it and they are sincere and patriotic. They will not allow it.
The ways and means, if the National Assembly had said no, we would never have had it.
But they also get some of the shares. That's what it means. That's why
Prof, let's take this short break. Then we'll return. But meanwhile, think about setting priority agenda for Mr. President and the state governors, because most time we forget about the governors. That's where the action actually takes place. So let's think of 3, 4, 5 agenda, critical agenda, that priority areas you think they should focus on. Because my brother, Prof, if you are not careful, these guys get into a situation where they just sit there, and then 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, before you know it, 4 years is gone, and we're still going around in circles.
Back to the same square. Yeah.
We'll take this short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with our conversation. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Prof, before we went on that short break, I asked you to give us, 4, 5 top priority agenda you want both the federal government and the states working together. What should they focus on?
I think the first thing they should do is security of lives and property. Because that's the primary responsibility of government. And you cannot have insecurity virtually everywhere. And then you say you have a government. It doesn't add up. So security should be a topmost priority for the government. Let them secure the lives of the people. It is when you are alive that you can talk about the economy. You can talk about infrastructure. You can talk about all other sectors that you may want to address, like
about your daily life,
like education and all that.
Whatever.
So I think if they are able to prioritize security, then the economy, because you can't have 1.3 million people in multidimensional poverty. And in fact, for me, I was even wondering, I said, it is probably high time that they have a ministry of poverty alleviation.
For me, the most critical infrastructure are 2. Our energy, our electricity, energy, and then 2, this, crude oil sector that has not profited Nigeria in any way. We should find solutions to these 2. Get Nigeria to have steady electricity supply, especially for businesses, and then secondly, households. Because if there is availability of maybe 12, 16 hours electricity guaranteed every day, MSMEs can thrive.
Certainly.
The small businesses can thrive. But if they have to, look at the cost of fuel now. If they have to depend to buying fuel to power their small generator, to do business, the printer, whatever, where are they going to go to?
It will kill a lot of businesses.
It will kill a lot of businesses.
Because they will transfer the cost on the customers. And the customers don't have the money.
Exactly.
So eventually you find that the business will collapse.
So the infrastructure, security, economy, infrastructure, then what again?
Education should be prioritized.
Okay.
Education should be prioritized.
I would have thought after security, education should have been number 2. I'm just saying, in my own opinion.
Yeah, I think you said 5 items that
exactly.
should be prioritized.
Exactly.
So education should also
be
a priority to the government.
I mean, does it not bother you that it does not seem like, because if the president is talking about student loans to the tertiary, whatever, and he didn't even talk about the primary, because for me, I don't know if you agree with me, Prof, where we're actually playing with danger, serious danger, is the primary secondary school enrollment, where we have 20 million Nigerian children of school-going age out of school.
Yeah. I think that's why I say education, not tertiary.
Yes.
And not students' loan.
Not students' loan.
That's not a good route to take.
Exactly.
If you are removing subsidy, which means you're going to save about 8 trillion.
Exactly.
And what ASU was asking for the other time was just 1.3.
1 point something trillion.
Which means you had the capacity to do that.
Oh, absolutely. We knew that they had that. It was not just their priority. It wasn't just their priority.
So if you can inject that money into the educational sector. It will help curb all this education tourism, people going to
Sudan and Benin, Togo to go and do what?
If you have been investing since 1999, and very soon we'll be spending 30 years of democracy uninterrupted if we're lucky that the system continues without any form of interruption. What can we show
as evidence
of
positive
3 decades? 3 decades,
Finally, Prof, I'm sure healthcare will be your 5th one.
Certainly.
Because our rates of maternal infant and maternal mortality is so high. Even Bill Gates was in Lagos yesterday, was saying, I mean, the investment Nigeria spends on each individual is about $10.
Yes.
Isn't that a scandal?
It is.
Because that's the point where I disagree with successive governments. When, especially this Buhari infrastructure, I said, no, the primary responsibility of government are the people.
Yes.
Make the welfare of the people the central points of your policies and programs. Once you remove them and you keep talking about all these things you're talking about, then you've lost.
And you see, another very important, vital thing that the government will need to do is
Yes.
orientation. You see, because when people talk about restructuring, I think sometimes we also need to restructure our brains and our minds, and we should imbibe the spirit of nationalism,
Absolutely.
patriotism, so that we don't, because without discipline, nothing
Will be achieved.
will be achieved. We need
Thank you so much, Prof, for
Thank you.
coming. I mean, this conversation continues. The government hasn't, the president hasn't announced his ministers, so we'll see when that is done. We'll assess them and all of that. Thank you for coming, Prof. I
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
it. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
That's the end of the interview segment. We'll take this short break, and when I return, I'll give my closing statements. Please stay with us. Welcome back. And here are my closing statements. The facts of our living reality in Nigeria currently are this. We have 133 million Nigerians living in multidimensional poverty, almost 40% general unemployment, well over 60% youth unemployment, 20 million children of school-going age out of school, poor education standards and products, poor access to decent health care, evidenced by the highest rates in infant and maternal mortalities globally, rampant insecurity with about 70,000 deaths in last 8 years alone, and about 3.2 million Nigerians living in several IDPs camps. Unbearable general inflation rates of 22%, driven principally by food inflation, epileptic electricity supply, sky-high prices of essential utilities, poor infrastructure, and the list goes on. Now, the question isn't what is or are our problems. We've gone past that. Even high schoolers can tell what Nigeria's main problem is. We have a people problem, period. Nigerians are some of the most intellectually gifted and entrepreneurially savvy people globally. In every field of human endeavor, we always excel, except when in this geographical space called Nigeria. Like Professor Chinua Achebe said, the failure of Nigeria is simply and squarely that of leadership. So, the main problem with Nigeria is a lack of patriotic leadership. From the mid-1980s until now, most of those who presided over the affairs of Nigeria at the federal, states, and local government areas have been thoroughbred saboteurs and enemies of the nation. It is perhaps the greatest irony of Nigeria's checkered history that whereas the British colonial rulers went the extra mile to ensure every Nigerian child had access to quality education, yet Nigerian rulers, particularly since the 1980s, have done the exact opposite. Where then are the Nigerian patriots, willing, ready, and competent to proffer practical and intelligent solutions to our endemic economic and development problems? Nigeria's challenges aren't intractable, but they seem intractable for a lack of patriotic and honest leadership. How then do we put Nigeria on the path of genuine patriotic leadership that delivers accountable good governance for all? Here are my suggestions. Number one, make people the central focus of your governance agenda. I'm speaking to both the president and the governors. Number two, still not number one, prioritize programs and policies that have direct impact and benefits to the people: jobs, education, healthcare, transportation, housing, security, etc. Number two, find new and competent Nigerians to assist you and stop the recycling of tired hands and exhausted brains. Government is serious business to be left solely as rewards for politicians or party hacks. Number three, demand for accountability and sanctions from public officials, both elected and appointed. Nobody should get away with crimes against the state. Number four, fight crimes and criminals with every weight of the state at your disposal. Let it be known everywhere that we're a nation governed by laws, and no criminal will go unpunished. Lastly, number 5, lead by example. Your actions and inactions will be replicated by all. So lead as patriots. Be good examples and worthy role models. I make this humble plea to the newly elected and appointed leaders at all levels. You have enough estates, mansions, private jets, luxury SUVs, billions and tens of millions in the banks, both local and foreign. Yet, some of these things will count, none of these things will count in your favor when your time is up. So it is about time you put Nigeria and Nigerians first in all your considerations. Serving this country as a patriot is the only way your name and legacy lives for centuries long after you're gone. Will you do what's best for this country for once? Will you? I hope you do. Remember, change requires action, and positive change requires positive action. I believe in a new Nigeria, and it is possible. And those are my closing thoughts. Now, that's the end of the program today. Remember to follow me on my different social media handles. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can watch this particular video and the others there at your convenience. Drop your comments also. I'd love to hear from you. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.